Chapter 31, Princess. Yes, I can. Now, Siegfried, please come here and let me take a look. He hesitated but came over and sat down obediently. The elegance of those steps. That was no man. And she wasn't. Now, to guard her privacy, I will omit what I saw in there, but let me just say it wasn't much better than in Sigurd. The only difference was that the force pushing me out was very soft and gentle. Still, it didn't stop me from leaving another present, carrot. I'm done. Lord Eldar, can you help my two nephews? No. I can't help imaginary people. So that second nephew of yours will probably die. Imaginary people? Lord Eldar, I don't understand you know? You realize that I just checked her body. Obviously, I would notice something major like a different gender. Wait. You are male. Are you a pervert? Did checking her body arouse you? I'm a tree. I can't get hard because I always am. My goddess, do you even realize that trees don't have the means to reproduce sexually? In addition, I checked her body with magic, not my eyes. She looked like she wanted to say something more regarding the subject, but held back. Now about that help you want. There are 2 steps. The first is a simple spell that can help you deal with the voice in your head. The second step will take me a few days as I need to fine-tune the spell. In the meantime, we can talk about my compensation. Compensation? Why would we need to compensate you? We are the royalty of this kingdom. Sigurd clearly had some issues holding in his temper. I couldn't blame him much, he was young and had the soul of a fire dragon in his body. That didn't mean I would give in though. I am not part of your kingdom, so it doesn't matter to me who you are. And before you ask me why I'm not part of the kingdom, why don't you go ask Volsung? Fine, we will pay you, but I don't want that other spell of yours. We don't need that. I'll teach you that spell for free. We don't need it. I'll learn it. Siegfried spoke against her brother. He looked positively infuriated. His pride forbade him from fully showing his temper, but his face was tinted in a dark shade of red. I wouldn't force Sigurd to learn this spell. I was only obliged to teach the willing. That was the promise I had made at that seminar. Ah, the nostalgia. Back then, I was still an ordinary student, attending the Western Mage Academy of the Grey Empire. I was spent most of my time studying and visiting my friends. At that time, the principal was going to hold a seminar on time magic due to an upcoming event. The moon was predicted to enter into a mysterious constellation with a few other celestial bodies, thus producing a spatial phenomenon of incredible rarity. But due to its innate spatial characteristics, the event happened sooner than predicted and the seminar was about to be cancelled. In the last minute, Lord Abel had arrived and held his seminar instead. This seminar was, as mentioned before, on the subject of dealing with powerful bloodlines. Then, when he was done, a scroll appeared in the lap of all participants. We received the spell for free, the only condition being that we taught it to others willing to learn. Enough of these sweet memories now. I had to teach Siegfried. She was a very attentive student, and by the end of the day, she was capable of using the spell. Sanity Lock. A light blue glow appeared around her fingertips. She brought her right hand up to her temple and did a turning motion with her fingers. The blue glow solidified into something similar to a screw and drilled into her head without hurting her skin in the least. After a short while, the blue glow dissipated as if it had never been there in the first place. Huh? I can still hear the voice in my head. Did I fail? No, you did great. As I said, the spell can only help you deal with the voice, it can't eliminate it. It's hard to explain how it works, but I'm sure you'll know what it does when the time comes. Chapter 32, Compensation. Seeing as it was already evening, Signy left with Sigurd and Siegfried. Their 2 guards followed them while Volsung stayed back. So you've had a look at their conditions now. When will you be done calibration the spell? I'm already done. You didn't say so this morning. Volsung, what do you think Sigurd's reaction would be if I told him I was finished and asked him to wait? Right, he would insist on learning it that very instant. Their bodies have already experienced the first transformation, so it will be easier for them. On the other hand, the uncontrolled awakening damaged their bodies. They should rest for a day or 2 before transforming. Then I believe you should receive your first reward. Volsung went to pull over the wagon. He removed the cover and revealed a bunch of frozen corpses. Those were beasts. And, the size of that one, a savage beast? It seemed you needed beast corpses to grow them. This will be your full compensation for teaching them. I'll give them to you once they can transform. You sure you don't want to teach them now? It will only do harm to them. Let's wait until tomorrow. Volsung nodded, grabbed one frozen beast and threw it over. I didn't catch it, no hands and all, but immediately started to absorb it. I spent the remainder of the night on the deduction of the vampiric viper's blueprint. To my great surprise, I felt like this was easier and faster than before. System, is this an easier blueprint? It isn't. It feels easier for you since your deduction will improve with every beast's blueprint you make. That was certainly convenient for me. With all the beasts Volsung brought along, I might be able to decrease the time needed for the savage beast. Morning came swiftly. Sigurd was already being impatient and asked if I was finished. I worked through the whole night. I'm done now, we can start. It was a rather smooth process. For Siegfried at least. Her body was clad in shining light blue scales, leaving only her face and hands completely human. Her figure retained its rough human proportions, and she didn't have wings, but her tail was much longer than usual. Her bloodline was from a water dragon, apparently not a combat-oriented species. These dragons were largely focused on healing and agility. Siegfried was still admiring her neat appearance when she felt a mental tide rushing from the depths of her consciousness. It was the dragon's soul, trying to take over. She tried to hold it off, but it kept approaching. She felt like she was about to be taken over. Then, the pressure suddenly eased. A blue barrier was keeping the soul at bay. Sanity Lock had finally demonstrated its terrifying effects by completely suppressing a dragon's soul. However, she was the only one who had learned this spell. She remembered with horror how her brother had rejected this precious spell. Upon hearing a chaotic, pain-ridden roar, she spun around. Sigurd's scales were a dark shade of red, resembling the fresh blood from a lethal wound. His tail was short but heavy and his wings were like heavy-looking, light red sails. Like Siegfried, Sigurd's face wasn't covered in scales. From his head, 2 menacing horns extended backward, their tips a glowing red. He was gripping his head, guttural roars escaped his throat. Signy had worry written all over her face. Lord Eldar, what's happening to him? He's fighting with the dragon's soul for dominance over his body. I'd step back if I were you. If Sigurd loses this battle, the dragon's soul can temporarily take over his body and might attack you. I won't be defeated so easily. Stop blabbering, you dumb tree. Sigurd could actually still talk? I had to admit that Boyswell was quite strong. Still, he spent the next 10 minutes kneeling on the ground roaring in pain. Please do remember, you can at most stay in this state about half an hour a day without damaging your bodies. The more you rank up, the longer you can safely remain in this state, and once you reach the same strength as a dragon, you'll be able to use it unrestricted. Chapter 33, New Blueprints. The pair of siblings changed back to their human forms and headed to the inn with Signe. They were both mentally and physically exhausted. What's the danger if the dragon takes over his body? Hard to say what exactly he will do. He might attack indiscriminately or target specific people. He might also just act normal or even do nothing. The danger lies not in a takeover, that's only temporary. The real danger is the voice. It poisons the mind and makes you do the dragon's bidding. Any advice on how to avoid that? Well, there's many ways. Ignoring the voice does the job. Also, the connection between the soul and mind goes both ways. It's possible to talk back. Thanks, I'll tell them. Bolson gave me my compensation and also returned to the inn. I felt a little giddy seeing that I received 4 more beast species and even a savage beast. Now the only thing I would need to evolve was time. But for that I had a plan. System, can I grow infant beasts? And will it still count as growing them? You can grow infants' beasts and they count, but be aware that after you release them, they will grow normally. Maturing periods of most beasts increase with their strength. How would that work out with the verdant serpent? Including the materials, you could shorten down the time of growth to 1 day, but its strength will only be that of a normal beast. It will take 30 years for it to mature. If grown completely, it would take little more than a month. That was acceptable for me. I couldn't control an adult anyway, so time was my priority. I estimated that the vampiric viper's blueprint would need another 8 days until completion. That gave me plenty of time to master tri-wielding. The royals left the next day, and I spent the next month getting all the beasts' blueprints. With every blueprint my deduction speed increased. It would now take only half the time to run the deduction on a beast. In the meantime I had also fully mastered dual wielding. It appeared that higher deduction skills helped with simultaneously completing multiple tasks. I had started to attempt tri-wielding, and it wasn't that bad. If I could further raise my deduction skill and put in a decent amount of effort, I would succeed in no time. Now it was time to start my greatest deduction yet. The verdant serpent's blueprint would allow me to achieve the next stage of evolution. 2 months. That was how long it took me to crack that formula and receive the complete blueprint. Thank the goddess I had increased my deduction skill before this and not directly made the attempt. I could now grow an infant verdant serpent. But for now I wouldn't. During my 2-month deduction period, Sven had returned with a beast's corpse. Well, 3 to be honest. The shadow horse that Sven hunted had been very powerful and managed to take down 2 tempest wolves before it was defeated. I had decided to get its blueprint first to increase my deduction just a little more. Sven had happily received his 50 iron ingots and left. This time the deduction of the shadow horse's blueprint merely took 1 day. Now, I was as prepared as I could. Growing the infant verdant serpent took another day. But what was 1 day compared to how long I had already been here? How long had I been here? 4 years? I couldn't remember. Splash. The gelatinous egg hit the ground and splattered. The little noodle that wiggled out of the remains of its egg was, as expected, green. It might not look dangerous, but the reason this thing was a savage beast when it matured was a combination of both physical tyranny and potent poison. This little thing might not have developed its tyrannical physique yet, but the poison could still kill a beast. Now as for tri-wielding, I had mastered it. Now as to how I would evolve. Simple, I have grown 3 different things so far. Now I would have to grow all 3 things together. And since I didn't want to blow up from 3 different formulas running not so simultaneously, I needed to be able to control 3 different currents of magic without letting them clash. Chapter 34, Mystic Tree. A new day was dawning. The clouds were painted in a beige red tone that gave the impression the sky was on fire. Around me, the forest was vivaciously swaying in the breeze, while the grass was filled with sparkling drops of dew. My 15-meter-tall body was brimming with energy. I slowly retracted the magic current that allowed me to grow beasts. Then, I let all 3 green currents slowly emerge from my core. The first current had allowed me to grow fruit. The second gave me the ability to grow ore, and the third was for growing beasts. They traveled up and up to the tips of my branches. A triple helix was formed by them spinning around its own axis. The helix gained spin, and the gaps between the different currents began to blur. Then, with a sudden stop, there was only one light green current left. And as this light green current flowed through my body, something reacted. The energy stored in my body exploded all of a sudden. My cells began expanding rapidly. A sudden growth spurt? It was about time. My pleasant surprise quickly turned into horror when I passed 50 meters of height and was still growing. It didn't stop. I was now more than 100 meters tall, and I wasn't stopping. The town was mostly in ruins. My roots had expanded and lifted patches of ground. The town was now split into different levels among my roots. I'd have to take care of that later. For now, I had bigger problems like my height, that was still increasing. At least I'd lost track of how big I was, so I couldn't panic too much. You are currently 218 meters and still growing. Why do you tell me that? Why didn't you warn me before I did it? What is so bad about growing? You'll be able to grow many more things at the same time. Look at me. I'm flipping huge. And what is bad about that? Name an example. Well, how about, fine. I admit that there isn't much of a difference for me. See, carrot carrot. Also, congrats, you became a mystic tree. You can now have your second descendant. Yeah, that descendant wouldn't be planted for quite a while. I felt no need to create another vulnerability that I couldn't fully protect. I wanted to first gain the power to dominate this world. Or at least fight anyone to a standstill. System, what are the benefits of this time's evolution, and what are the conditions? Your speed of growing things has increased tremendously. You can grow all manner of things at the same time now. You have the ability to do low-level changes to the things you grow. All your base stats have increased. To evolve, you must win the trust of a mythical or divine beast and make it your guardian beast. This beast cannot be self-grown. So basically, I would need to wait until a strong beast comes over and feed it until it liked me. Simple enough. But for now, small steps. I grew another squirrel and dropped it. Not the best idea. I reabsorbed the dead squirrel. System, how big am I now? Less than 300 meters. How am I supposed to grow anything useful like this? Every beast will die from the fall, any fruit will be ruined, and the ore will make craters. Grow platforms, dummy. As for the workforce to get the harvest, they'll arrive soon. And how do you know that? So, the plan for a mass army of monsters temporarily failed. Just make it completely failed. There's a limit to how many beasts you can control. If you gain more, they will just run away. The beasts have to make a contract with someone else or die if you need more space. What's the limit? At the moment you can at most control 1,000 beasts, 10 savage beasts and 1 mythical beast. And no, you can't exchange the mythical for more ordinary beasts. New plan. Altering things I grow, namely apples, because I don't have any other fruit. Mental note, buy other things to grow from Aldi. Back to getting that golden apple. I mean altering that apple. Who would ever want a golden apple? Health boost? The prettiest woman in the world that inevitably brings my own destruction? Who would want that? Chapter 35, not golden but still great, also elves. The alterations were mostly of a simple nature. An apple was usually filled with nutrients and all that stuff. Now, what would happen if it was filled with something different? Or what if it wasn't just filled with how much needed to be in there, but with how much could fit in there? I'd first attempt the later, it seemed easier. I first grew a normal apple. Then, making sure not to overdo it, I slowly increased its nutritional value to the max. The apple looked more vibrant now. I couldn't test its effects, but maybe that new workforce could help with that. So for now, I grew some more of these vibrant apples before returning to the former plan in mind. The next apple one filled with nature magic instead of nutrients. The outcome was an emerald green apple. I tried the same with all the magic types I was proficient in. Lightning gave me a yellow apple, healing was spring green, and the one wind was lime green. So the color depended on what element the fruit was filled with. Their different effects were still unknown, but I assumed they would correlate with what they were made of. I was really curious about those effects. Wait, who said I couldn't do some tests? I recalled the little verdant serpent and squirrel that were nested in my crown. The serpent was a little too precious to use for first trial experiments, but the squirrel was just perfect. Now from the 4 possible effects created by the elemental apple's nature seemed the best to begin with. Lightning and wind were too dangerous and healing would likely show no effect. So I let the squirrel start nibbling at the nature apple. It had barely eaten a sliver when its size increased a little. By the time it was done eating the whole apple, it was roughly half the size of a human. Naturally, I repeated the experiment a few times. On a side note, may I introduce my 3-meter squirrel to you? Yeah, that happened. So the nature apple made things grow. Next was the wind apple. The squirrel consumed it and was wrapped in a mini cyclone. A slight increase in speed followed by an attack of hyperactivity. Definitely not safe for consumption. The lightning apple nearly killed the squirrel. Good thing it had grown so big and could endure the arcs of lightning that ravaged its body. The healing apple then made the squirrel good as new. Its effect had been the only one I could predict. Are you Lord Eldar? You look quite different from Aldi's description. He never mentioned that you were this big. Who? I searched the area with my magic perception. The one who had just spoken was hard to notice. Amidst all the nature his body blended into the surroundings near perfectly. I quickly carved a rune of sight pointing in his direction. Blonde, sparkly hair that reached his waist accompanied by a pale complexion, light green eyes, and pointy ears. He wore leaf-green clothing that was hard to spot within the forest and from his back hung a long yet slender bow. He was an elf. Though not your average wood elf. Based on his magic, he was at the Duke Magus realm. Also, the intricate carvings on his bow were lined with gold and even emeralds. My guess was that this elf should be of elven royalty. I apologize if I have scared you with my sudden appearance, Lord Eldar. I am Eppley, Prince of the Elves and Ambassador to the Great Tree of Destiny. Hi? You probably already know, but I'm Eldar. I hate to ask, but who is that tree of destiny? That would be you. How about no? But you are the one mentioned in the prophecy. A wooden giant north the skies of mankind that possesses consciousness beyond this world. Fruit, ore, and beasts he gives them all, but should he burn in hate and leave this world, all will be lost. We elves have received this prophecy from our eldest seer, and that old witch has never spoken untrue. Thus, we are here to help and protect you. You said we. Who else is there? I was accompanied by 20 others, but I left them behind when I saw your majestic height. They should arrive alongside Aldi in the next few days.